Hi, I'm David Shindler, and welcome to another episode of the Learning to Leap podcast. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Alexandra Galviz, who describes herself on her LinkedIn profile as serial giver, kindred content spirit, gentle millennial warrior, and wisdom whisperer. Now that is different, isn't it, Alex? And why we can see you're such a rising star. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David.
It's a pleasure. So today, funnily enough, is National Employability Day in the UK, which is the second one that's been run. So it seems rather appropriate that we should be talking because this is an area that's, with careers and jobs, is very much your field. So I don't know if you want to start by just giving a little introduction to yourself and a little bit about your amazing journey to where you are today.
Yes, no problem at all. So I set up my own business rather recently, but prior to that, I was working in the corporate world. So for about 4.5 years, just after I graduated. And I'd set myself a goal from when I was rather young, and said, do you know what? I really want to get into the world of finance. I didn't precisely know where exactly. I had, great ambitions to work in the city and, go into management and, earn a lot of money as you do in the finance world.
Yeah.
And that was something that I had from a very young age. And I worked my way through university, sort of doing different internships every summer.
Yep.
Because I did it in a very unconventional way. I decided to study what I loved at university, which was French. But I had no intention of getting into teaching or interpreting, or anything related to French, really. And so I thought, do you know what? I'm going to do some internships during the summer. That way, in business. That way, by the time I graduate, I have about a combined 1 year experience in the sort of corporate world. Graduated, got headhunted straight out of university by an American foreign exchange company. And that was where my sort of corporate journey started. 3.5 years later, I was the head of training for another corporate foreign exchange company, and hit my goal in terms of, being in a certain position of seniority, earning the money that I wanted to earn, and basically hit this goal that I'd been working towards for such a long time. And it kind of made me realize that actually it wasn't really what I wanted.
Yeah.
Or what I'd wanted, which was sort of a huge realization for me, and a bit of an identity crisis at the same time. It was like, how did I end up getting here, and why doesn't it sit with as I thought it would? So it took a lot of sort of introspection, self-awareness, and work to figure out, okay, if this isn't what I want to be doing, what is? And then basically that combined with sort of the pressures of the role that I had, just made me think, do you know what? I'm ready to move on. But I still wasn't particularly 100% sure what I was going to do. And I thought the best way is just to give my, head some space. And to me, that was flying across the world to Nepal, India, and Sri Lanka for 6 weeks and seeing a completely different, thing, and being able to meet new people and have new ideas. So I did that. And then I came back to the UK. And my business was born pretty much out of demand, from people around me that had said, I'm also stuck in my job, but, I don't know how to move out of it, and I don't know what I want to do next. And these are sort of young professionals that have been working towards these jobs for quite a while, and then similar to me sort of have this, oh, actually, it's not what I want to do. It doesn't really align with my values, and I'm looking for a bit more purpose or impact. And all of a sudden the salary doesn't mean too much, and it's not where they want to be. So that was sort of one side of things. And then I started to do a lot on LinkedIn and sharing my experiences, which grew, my audience dramatically. And they basically started saying, how do you do what you do and why do you do it? And the more vocal I was, the more people began to be interested in what I was doing. And then again, that was another side of my business that grew in terms of coaching people and running workshops on LinkedIn.
That's really, really interesting. There's so many fascinating aspects to that story. It's got to take you back to what you said at the beginning about doing internships every summer. I think that one of the things that young people kind of sometimes don't realise is that the more internships or work experience you can do whilst you're studying, the better, because it's kind of like try before you buy. And secondly, that you then sort of you decided to study something that you loved rather than for a specific goal for a job, etc. Which is quite unusual, because so many people say, "Well, I'm going to fall into this job as a result of my degree." Well, that didn't happen with you. Really interesting how the choices you made.
Yes, I've never sort of done things the conventional way, should we say?
Yeah.
And for me, it was about, I'm going to be studying something for another 4 years. I want it to be something that that I'm interested in, and I thought, do you know what? it's better to have the experience in what I want to do. And I thought, I'd seen my brother also sort of take the unconventional route of studying aerospace engineering and then going into the world of finance. So I already had an example within my sort of network to see that actually it is possible to go from a completely different background as long as you have the skills to transfer. And for me, that the way I decided to do that was to do internships.
It's interesting also. I mean, did you enjoy your French degree? Did it live up to your sort of thoughts about doing something you love? Did you love it?
That's an interesting question. I did enjoy it. I love everything French, the literature, the art history, but I wasn't, I would never call myself an academic person. So I'm very much a hands-on learner, and in the world of work, I'd like to think I'm relatively business savvy, and done quite well in my corporate sort of experience. But I've always found that I struggled at university. I find it very hard learning from a book, and university is very structured in a way that is sort of for learners that learn in a certain type of way. And for me, that was a bit of a struggle throughout education as well. So, I got a 2.2, and that's, an okay grade, but not amazing. But actually what I found is that the minute I graduated, I got a job instantly because of the experiences that I had, whereas I had friends that had gone down the conventional route of doing business and economics and who had 2-1s and firsts, and they were really, really struggling because they didn't have any experience. So for me, it was just playing to my strengths. I knew that I was better in a working environment and learning on the job, as they say, than learning from a book. But I still enjoyed my degree in terms of the subject because it was something I was incredibly passionate about.
The other thing that struck me was you decided that this wasn't for me, so I'm going to go off travelling. I'm going to go and, in effect, coach myself. I mean, was that how you saw it, or did you draw upon other people and resources?
So it's really funny because a lot of people, when I went traveling, said, "Oh, you're going to find yourself," especially because of the countries I was going to visit. But actually, I'd done all of that work prior to leaving, which is what a lot of people didn't know. So whilst I was working, I was going to a whole bunch of seminars, workshops, courses, to find out who I was and to find out what was this niggle of this thing missing in my life that in my career, primarily in terms of why do I feel like I'm in the wrong place or doing the wrong thing. And I'm sort of the kind of person that just can't sit there and wait for it to come to me. I'm very sort of initiative driven, and I thought I need to get rid of this feeling. I need to find what I'm meant to do. And so I just basically, like you said, coached myself. Did a lot of introspection, asked myself, those really big questions. What do I want to, leave in this world? What impact do I want to make? What area is that in? And obviously through the help of these workshops and seminars and great trainers that I came across, And by the time I got to the traveling stage, I'd already figured all of that out. So for me, it was more about using the travel to sort of empty my mind and sort of close the chapter on a book, because essentially what I was doing was walking away from something I'd worked for about 8 years. So walking away from a lifestyle, shall we say, that that I'd become accustomed to, and realizing that what I was going to live next would be incredibly different to what I had. And for me, it was also redefining success. Pardon. And it was basically, figuring out, what does success mean to me? Because what I'd realized in my last job, or sort of in my last part of my career, was that success that I thought it was very much based on the way I was brought up, the people that I had around me, the environment that I was in, what society tells us, and that it's money, power, and status. And actually, those three things didn't bring me any joy. And so it was really a piece of, okay, wow, this is what I've been brought up on for the last however many years, and to shift that entirely and create something new is an incredibly difficult thing that took a process. So for me, the traveling was basically, let me actually enjoy the traveling and let me sort of relax, really, because it was kind of like being on a treadmill, because I was always looking to climb up the corporate ladder, look for opportunities. What could I do to increase my sort of employability? And it was sort of hitting pause, really, and sort of mulling over what I'd learned and what I'd done over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years.
So when you came back, you kind of re-energized, cleared your mind. You had this clarity that maybe you didn't have before. How did you then make that that leap, if I can use that expression, from turning it into a reality?
I'm that feels rather blurry to me because it's quite recent. So I got asked this the other day by a student, and at a networking event, but I think I didn't think about it too much, if that makes sense. I had the idea of what I thought I'd want to create, and then I started to think, okay, what do I do to be able to create this? And for me, it was a matter of reinventing myself in some way, because obviously I had a huge network within the foreign exchange world, and I thought this is obviously a chapter I'm closing, and I want a new audience, or sort of bringing on some of the audience that I already had from writing on LinkedIn, but creating a different one. And I basically sort of, what I noticed hugely was that I sort of dropped that mask that we tend to wear in the corporate world, in terms of the way you act, the things that you say. And once I did that, I felt a lot freer. And in doing so, I was completely at ease to sort of try anything, and be a bit more open. And this sort of grew a whole different audience for me, and their encouragement helped me to sort of start that path. And it was about, right, what do I need to do? Let's get that done. Setting up a website in the business. I did it. And I think that a lot of people sit down and think about it, and then get stuck, or they basically talk themselves out of doing it. Because it's a huge to want to set up your own business, and there's so much out there to discourage people to do it, and also to encourage them. But there's a lot of talk about businesses fail within the first year, and it's going to be a struggle to get clients. And for me, it was just taking that first step. And after that first step, the minute one door opened, the next one opened, and the next one opened, and the next one opened. So you don't really have time to sort of and think about what you're doing. And it feels a bit like a roller coaster. Um, so it's
Very interesting that, because the phrase that comes to mind that everybody kind of uses is, "Oh, be yourself, be yourself," and that's quite a sort of passive state to be. I always feel it's about becoming yourself, which means doing something, and that sounds to me like what you're describing is that, and also I'm very interested in what you write about sometimes about your introversion and how you make that work for you. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes. So I learned about or sort of officially learned about my introversion about 2 years ago, which I think is quite late to realize. I mean, people
Not
learn
at
about these.
all. Some people don't haven't
Yeah,
learnt it yet.
yeah, learn about these at different stages. But I basically saw a TED talk by Susan Cain,
Mm,
who does it. Does this TED talk that to basically explain what introversion is, and goes on to sort of tell people how important it is that we pay attention to these quieter people, because they're just as important as the louder ones. And sort of in society and corporate environments, we tend to glorify the extroverted, super charismatic, loud person, whether
mm.
that's in a party or in a work context, in a meeting, etc. And I was just fascinated by this talk. And then I bought her book, which is called Quiet.
Mm.
And I read it, and it was absolutely life changing because I read myself in every single page,
Mm.
and I started to really realize that actually what I called my introversion when I was younger, I basically called my weirdness. Because I was always quite reserved in school. I was always quite quiet. I was to myself, really, and that never really changed throughout my life, or slightly more now. But I sort of learnt to embrace it,
Mm.
and then I started to be very vocal about it, because almost sort of to campaign the fact that I was that way. Um, because I wanted more people to know there are so many qualities in that sort of personality trait, and I just decided to be more open with it, and also to tell other people that are introverts that it's totally fine to be the way that we are, and that there's so much to gain about being this way, um, and and that's sort of why I tend to talk about it a lot, and highlight it as much as I can. So both for the extroverts to understand a bit more about some introverts that may be around them or that they have to work with,
Mm.
and vice versa.
And as we can see and hear with this conversation, you can be vocal and have a preference for introversion at the same time.
Yes, exactly. People tend to think that introversion is a lot to do with just keeping to yourself, but
Mm.
actually it's more so that we re-energize on our own rather
Mm.
than in large social context. So I'm totally fine with sort of one-to-one conversations and 2 to 3 people talking with me. Um, but in a larger context, I tend to go into my shell a bit more. But when you learn about introversion, you start to also learn how to not be so much like that in certain contexts, and be
Mm.
able to sort of adapt to the social context that you're in. And that's something that I've learned a lot through the last year or two. And it's not, I'm able to reach people in just a different way. So
Mm.
whilst I don't get up on stage and talk to thousands very regularly, although I'm starting to do that a lot more
Mm.
now. I do that through a medium of writing, and for me that's great because I feel like I can express myself how I wish to.
I can empathise with what you're saying, because when I was in my 20s, I had a terrible fear of speaking in public, and so I went on a course. I went on a 15-week course once a week, where they made you stand up in front of a group and talk about anything for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And by the end of 15 weeks, I could do it standing on my head because it was practice. and you got over those fears and you learned some techniques. Okay, it was not my natural state, but it worked and it stayed with me through my working career. So it can be done, even if you feel like that's not me. You can learn the skills and techniques to do it, and the confidence.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. I want to come on a little bit to what you're doing in a minute, and I'm also very interested in your role and links with LinkedIn, because as I understand, you're an ambassador, a young ambassador for LinkedIn, and part of your business, I understand, is all about helping people understand LinkedIn and make the best use of it. Well, how do you see your generation? And I know there's this great hype around millennials, which is not a phrase I particularly like because it's a bit of a label. But how do you think employers view young people today, and how does that link to LinkedIn?
Yeah. So, I mean, I absolutely love talking about this topic because it's something I'm incredibly passionate about, being a millennial myself. And I don't mind the term. A lot of people, I think the term in itself is an issue because it's had so much sort of stigma and sort of negative arguments attached to it that people start to dislike the term. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's used for marketing purposes and to just categorize in a generation. You know, how would you describe that specific
I suppose the danger with it is that you lose sight of individuals.
Yes, very true. And so for me, in terms of millennials, I think they're really misunderstood. I actually don't think they're that much different to other generations. I think in the big difference is that they grew up in a different world in terms of we grew up in a time where there was a lot of digital and it's what we're primarily known for. And as the next generation that will come, they will be growing up in a different time again, with different things around them and lots of different societal changes, etc. So their views are going to be completely different to my generation. And I think that what we tend to forget is actually we have a lot more similarities. We look for the differences, and we, segregate the different generations by going, you're like this and we're not like this. And actually, there's a lot more similar than we seem to sort of talk about.
What are those similarities, do you think?
So when you look at things like people or millennials wanting to be fulfilled in their career or wanting to create an impact, or wanting to earn money, be well paid, those are things that anyone wants, really. Yeah. The only difference, and I think this is the huge thing that brings this sort of clash, this generational clash, is that millennials are very outspoken. And this isn't something that we've seen in prior generations, or also, we're told what I found in speaking to sort of older generations, they've said, we used to be like you actually, we used to want to make a change and we used to want, a more fulfilled career and a better vision and more impact. But, we raised our hands in protest and no one heard us. So we just stopped. Whereas millennials are not wanting to stop the conversation. And I think this is one of the reasons. And the other one is that this generation, because they, might not have been so vocal about it and had to sort of stick it out in the jobs that they didn't particularly want. And, this was when the company man and the corporate ladder was so rife that they stuck to these jobs for 20, 30 years, maybe potentially in the same companies, and thought, do you know what? I've got to stick to this because I've got a family and a mortgage to pay. Whereas my generation are completely going against the grain and are thinking, do you know what? If I don't like it here, I'm going to leave. Regardless if they've been there a year, 2 years, 3 years. They call us the job hoppers. And it's because if we don't find a place that aligns with our values and who we are and what we want to do and the flexibility that we're after and the impact, then they move on and find something else. they're not ready to compromise as much.
So what does that mean in terms of a tension between millennials who feel like that and employers? So some people are desperate for jobs, keen to work, trying to find the right place for them. However, employers want loyalty, they want commitment, and so on. How do you square that challenge?
I think that there's a huge shift in terms of what this new generation wants. They want, flexibility. They want to create an impact. They're not so crazy about, the perks of beanbags and breakfasts as they seem to think. And it's about being more engaged and having more hands-on sort of projects. When I talk to a lot of sort of my network around this age range, they say, I went to university, I dedicated my life to studying, business or economics, etc. And then I find myself doing presentations. And as in, sitting there doing PowerPoint or working on a, Excel database. And they're like, I want to be more involved. And that this is sort of a hierarchical issue. And it's about, businesses need to start thinking that this is the next generation that's going to come in, and it's the biggest workforce ever. And once they do come in, are they already ready to meet the requirements? And I think that they're going to start to be forced to be more sort of flexible in what they offer and the way they do things, and adapt to this new generation. And, at the end of the day, they're going to start to be in management positions. So I think that's going to have a huge impact as well, because they'll be more open to these new ways of doing business. And I think we're very still set in traditional corporate structures sort of ways. And I think that it won't be very long before, newer people come into the workforce and want to start to change things to sort of meet their expectations, but also the ones of the generations coming in. And I think we're gonna see huge differences come in, and whether some businesses are going to be ready, some will and some won't, because they'll still be set in their ways. But I think it's going to be a huge shock factor for those that aren't prepared. And I think that those that will prepare will be way ahead of the game, because
and again, it will be interesting
flexible
though, won't
in
it?
terms of.
It'll be interesting when you've got this multi-generational workforce, because we're living and working longer. So different generations are going to have to get along with each other, and you might find that people are coming back in different roles to work for a different generation, or shall I say, with a different generation rather than for. But the power balance might change.
Yes, definitely.
Good. So just on LinkedIn, what sort of messages have you got for people of your generation looking to make their way in the world about using LinkedIn as a really effective tool? What's your key messages around that?
Could you repeat that, because it got cut out?
Oh, sorry. What are your key messages around using LinkedIn as a really effective tool to find your way in the world?
Yeah, so in terms of using LinkedIn, I've used it incredibly well to be able to get companies to come to me rather than apply for lots of jobs. So whilst, when I graduated, I did the whole, hundreds of applications in hope that one would, stick. And now I know that is the totally wrong approach. And what I learned to do was basically make sure that my profile was really optimized with keywords, and that it was, completely full. It had every single part that had information about who I was and what I did, and then started to sort of create a brand around who I was. So, starting to share content that to me interested me. Started to build a network. So from the people that I met in my internships to people that I met at networking events, and started to, increase that network, and then starting to add value. And I think this is something that kind of a lot of people are just starting to understand. But the way you create a brand and you create a following, is by adding value to your network. So if there's a particular area that interests you, be it, millennials or careers, I don't know if it's your specific industry that you're in, it's about having conversations with the people in your network. A lot of people mistake LinkedIn for just being a place to put your CV on. But it's actually so much more than that. It's becoming more of a social networking. I mean, it's always been a networking platform, but it's becoming a lot more social. And it's about engaging in conversations with other professionals, and meeting new people. I've met an incredible amount of people, both on there and then on there that I've then met off LinkedIn, that have become great contacts. And great friends as well. So I think that, yes, building your network, making sure your profile's optimized, adding value to your network is really the place to start in terms of using LinkedIn and connecting with people.
I also think that you're underselling yourself slightly, because the thing that I think makes you different in terms of how a lot of other people who are doing this, but you are refreshing in many ways, because there's a level of courage and honesty in the way in which you write about your experiences that taps into or resonates with a lot of people. And that for me is something that is quite unusual, because it's quite a brave thing to put yourself out there, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, the reason I did that, I sort of fell into it accidentally. I wrote a post the day before I left my corporate job about this goal that I had as a young girl, and that I with a photo of me in my office, and explained the reasons why I was leaving, and it sort of went viral, and there was about 6,000 views. And I started to think, why did this post in particular resonate with so many people? And I realized that actually a lot of people go through this, but not a lot of people talk about it. And there's something great about being able to talk about this so openly, because you start to let people know that, one, it's okay to feel this way, and two, there's other people feeling this way, and you start to build a connection with people that you don't necessarily know. And what I've always found on LinkedIn is that we're incredibly great at showing our promotions and our brand spanking new car. And what we don't do is we show the journey from the start to getting that, because actually that line's not linear. It's not easy. It's full of obstacles. It's full of struggles. It's full of failures. And even in very successful people, we don't tend to see we just see the finished product. And what I wanted to start to do was show the whole journey. It was, the days that I get up and think, God, have I made the wrong decision? The times where, I have internal conflicts. And I realized that in being more vocal about this, you add a huge human element to something that is deemed very, a platform that is very professional and very corporate. And even in the corporate world, we don't have these conversations, and actually, if we, boil it down, we're all humans, and we have this inherent need to connect with people. And yet we put masks physically and digitally to avoid telling people who we are, and to conform to a certain type of way. And I made a very conscious decision of leaving that mask at the door, and starting to be who I truly was, and being open with it, and telling people about it, and saying, do you know what, it's okay, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to be open and authentic. And if anything, it's actually, a great thing to do, because you build a community of like-minded people, and of people that also want to be that way. And you end up inspiring a lot of people. And it's been an incredible journey to be on. And for me, it's all about sharing that with other people, and having them on that journey with me.
And you're still on that journey, and it's really refreshing
Yes.
to hear. So we've come to the end of our chat. So I just want to thank you really very much indeed for being so open and honest and actually practicing what you preach in this conversation. It's been great. How can people contact you and get in touch and hear more about what you do?
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Alexandra Galviz, or you can look at my website, which is www.alexandragalviz.com.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much again, and I look forward to seeing your progress.
Thank you very much, David.